focus.
But at first, it's a condition that's only cured by growing out of it. But you sometimes wonder if you will survive that long. At least I do. So tonight we're starting something that might help those who are raising, teaching, working with, or even being a teenager. Let's begin with some good news. A new tool, startling research into the mind behind the secret life of teens.
There is sex and alcohol and drugs. And I think parents are trying to deny this, which is why kids don't want to talk to their parents about it.
Yeah, there's definitely things that you wouldn't tell them.
They think that since it happened one way with them, then it's going to happen that way with us. But that's not always the case.
Different schools, cultures, sexes, doesn't much matter. Right now, they're all members of the same tribe.
The thing about teenagers is they want to rebel.
I think it's just that they're looking for something fun to do.
While the elders are sweating it out and looking for help.
And they can be rude, and they can be insensitive, and they can be so self-absorbed, and you still love them, but they behave crazy.
They always have to have the last word, and I still haven't understood that.
The arguing?
Oh my God, arguing.
Your daughter who's
16.
Who's 16 has entered that phase, and so she loves to argue and practice it on you.
There's some really critical changes that are taking place in late childhood and early adolescence.
Those changes have finally been proven to be much more than just raging hormones.
Everything still okay?
At the National Institute of Mental Health, Dr. Jay Geed is using magnetic resonance imaging to debunk a long-accepted theory about brain development.
We thought that the brain was pretty much fully developed by the age of 4 or 5, and we know that's definitely not the case.
Child psychiatrist Bennett Leventhal says the discovery of the brain shaping that begins again in late childhood offers an opportunity.
We can make an impact. The brain doesn't just develop on its own. It develops partly in response to its experiences and the environment that it lives in.
The new pictures show the teenage brain maturing basically from back to front. So while adults process the world through the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of the brain, sometimes called the CEO, teens are mainly relying on the amygdala. The emotional center, it runs on instinct and gut reaction. It's looking for things that create intense feelings.
So they're not as afraid of the roller coaster, not as afraid of driving fast. They're not as easily scared, and their nervous systems don't turn on and say, get ready to run away or protect yourself as readily as do adults.
I'm not afraid of anything. I'm ready for everything. I'm looking out for everything.
It's trial by error, sort of. Everyone makes mistakes, and your parents tell you about it. But then again, why don't I try for myself and see what comes out of it?
Go.
16-year-old Pat Covey says sports help keep him focused through a teenage world of temptation. That's great for another part of the brain still under construction. It needs physical input like sports and dancing. The cerebellum helps regulate coordination, music, mathematics, and higher social skills, and it's going through dramatic changes right now. Speaking of drama, it rules. A teenager might see his or her entire future in one failed exam.
And if your GPA doesn't go to this, then you can't get into this college, and if you don't get into that college, then you can't get a good job, and if you don't get a good job, you're not going to make enough money. If you don't make enough money, you're not going to get a wife. If you don't get a wife, you're not going to make a family. If you don't make a family, your parents aren't going to like you. They're going to be wondering, why don't I have grandkids? Why don't I have grandkids?
If he thought that far ahead about everything, Pat might be ready to go out on his own when the CEO of his brain sets priorities and suppresses impulses. Until then, grown-ups are needed, if not always appreciated.
It's better than it usually is.
So they always have to have a place they can come back to that's predictable and consistent.
And home is a place to come back to because most teens are trying to go just about any place their parents are not. Tomorrow, what one author calls the sacred flight of the teenager. Markets basically the parental balancing act between freedom and safety.
I love that kid's soundbite. That's exactly
His
how I
whole
felt.
world in one test.
Okay, so teens are not a new invention here. Why are we only now beginning to study the brain?
Well, because we now, through MRI, have a safe, consistent way to look at the brain, and we've had it long enough to look at teen brains for the last 10 years. There's a set of twins that have been being studied week in and week out for 10 years, and what they found has been startling.
Those poor twins.
Well, maybe not. They're better understood, perhaps.
Good piece.